In the sweltering heat of July 1825, President Jean-Pierre Boyer of Haiti stood in the presidential palace in Port-au-Prince, staring at a document that would determine the fate of his nation for generations. Outside, in the harbor, 14 French warships sat with their cannons trained on the city, their hulls dark against the Caribbean sky. The messenger who had delivered the ultimatum stood silent in the corner, watching the president's hands tremble as he read the terms. This was not a negotiation. It was a robbery dressed in the language of diplomacy. And Boyer knew that every word on that paper was written in the blood of his people. The French crown was demanding 150 million francs in gold as compensation for the loss of their richest colony. They called it an indemnity for the property seized during the Revolution, property that included the enslaved human beings who had freed themselves. The calculation was cold and obscene. Each franc represented the estimated value of a plantation, a sugar mill, a coffee press, and most grotesquely, the monetary worth of the 500,000 enslaved people who had fought for their freedom. The French accountants had tallied up the cost of liberation and sent Haiti a bill for winning its own independence. Boyer had 5 days to accept, or the warships would begin the bombardment. The entire nation, barely 2 decades old, hung between capitulation and annihilation. Haiti's path to this moment of extortion began on the night of August 22, 1791, when enslaved people in the northern province rose up against their masters in the most successful slave rebellion in human history. For 13 brutal years, the revolutionaries fought against the armies of France, Spain, and Britain, enduring yellow fever, starvation, and the scorched earth tactics of European powers determined to crush the uprising. They defeated Napoleon's most experienced generals, men who had conquered half of Europe by using guerrilla warfare and the knowledge of their own terrain. On January 1st, 1804, Jean-Jacques Dessalines declared Haiti independent, the first black republic in the world and the only nation born from a successful slave revolt. But freedom, they would discover, came with a price that would be extracted over and over again. The new nation was immediately isolated by the global powers who feared that the example of Haiti would inspire slave rebellions throughout the Americas. The United States refused to recognize Haiti's independence for nearly 60 years, terrified that the virus of black liberation would spread to its own enslaved population. France, humiliated by the military defeat, imposed a trade embargo that strangled Haiti's economy. European banks refused to lend money to the rebel nation. The international community built an invisible wall around Haiti, ensuring that its experiment in black self-governance would be starved of capital, trade, and diplomatic legitimacy. By 1825, Haiti had survived as an independent nation, but it was economically suffocating, and France knew it. King Charles X of France, a reactionary monarch who had recently ascended to the throne, saw an opportunity to restore some measure of French honor and fill his treasury. He dispatched Baron de Macau with a fleet of warships and a demand for compensation that was dressed up in the rhetoric of fairness. The French argued that the former colonists, many of whom had fled to France after the Revolution, deserved to be compensated for the loss of their estates. These colonists had been living in Paris and other French cities, bitter and impoverished, demanding that the crown restore their fortunes. The French government decided that Haiti should pay for the restoration. It was a breathtaking act of imperial arrogance, demanding that the victims of slavery compensate their former enslavers for the inconvenience of losing their human property. President Boyer was trapped in an impossible calculus. If he refused, the French would bombard Port-au-Prince and likely invade, returning Haiti to colonial servitude or worse, triggering a bloodbath that would destroy the fragile institutions of the young republic. If he accepted, Haiti would be saddled with a debt so massive that it would consume the nation's resources for decades. Boyer was not a revolutionary firebrand like Dessalines or Toussaint Louverture. He was a pragmatist, a politician who had risen through the military ranks and believed in negotiation and stability. He looked at the warships in the harbor and he calculated the cost of resistance. He believed he was choosing the survival of the nation, but he was actually signing away its future. On July 11, 1825, Boyer issued a proclamation accepting the French terms. He announced to the Haitian people that in exchange for French recognition of Haiti's independence, the nation would pay 150 million francs in 5 annual installments. The proclamation tried to frame the agreement as a victory, emphasizing that France had finally recognized Haiti as a sovereign nation. But the Haitian people understood the bitter truth. They had fought for their freedom with blood and had won it on the battlefield. Now they were being forced to buy that same freedom again with gold. It was the most expensive retroactive ransom in history, a debt imposed not for money borrowed, but for the crime of liberating themselves. The scale of the indemnity was staggering beyond comprehension. 150 million francs was roughly 10 times Haiti's annual revenue at the time. It was more than the amount the United States had paid France for the entire Louisiana Purchase 2 decades earlier, a transaction that transferred 828,000 square miles of territory. Haiti, a small Caribbean nation still recovering from the devastation of war, was being asked to pay an amount that exceeded the value of a continental empire. The French had designed the debt to be unpayable, a permanent shackle that would keep Haiti in a state of economic servitude. To meet the terms, Haiti would have to borrow money from French banks at extortionate interest rates, creating a cycle of debt that would spiral for generations. Boyer's government immediately began the brutal work of extraction. They imposed new taxes on the already impoverished population, taxing coffee, sugar, and every export that left the island. They cut spending on education, infrastructure, and public health, redirecting every available franc toward the debt payment. Haitian farmers who had just begun to cultivate small plots of land for themselves were now taxed so heavily that they could barely survive. The promise of the revolution that the land would belong to those who worked it was betrayed by the need to pay France. The entire economy was reorganized around servicing the debt. Haiti became an extraction machine, funneling its wealth to Paris to compensate the descendants of slave owners. But even with these brutal measures, Haiti could not meet the payment schedule. The French banks, eager to profit from Haiti's desperation, offered loans with interest rates that ranged from impossible to predatory. Haiti borrowed money from French financiers to pay the French government, creating a double extraction. The banks charged interest that compounded year after year, so that even as Haiti made payments, the total amount owed continued to grow. It was a debt trap designed with mathematical precision, a financial noose that tightened with every payment. By the mid-19th century, Haiti was spending roughly 80% of its national budget on debt service, leaving almost nothing for roads, schools, hospitals, or the basic functions of government. The human cost of the debt was measured in lost generations, Haitian children grew up without schools because there was no money for teachers. Haitian farmers worked land that produced wealth that immediately left the country, flowing to French banks and French creditors. The country that had been the richest colony in the Americas, producing more wealth than all 13 American colonies combined before the Revolution, was now trapped in grinding poverty. The fertile soil that had made French plantation owners immensely rich was still productive, but the profits no longer stayed in Haiti. They were siphoned off to Paris, payment for a debt that was rooted in the immorality of slavery itself. If you're still here, watching this moment when a nation was forced to pay for its own freedom, if you believe that financial exploitation can be as devastating as military conquest, go ahead and like this video and comment the word justice below. Let's see how many of us recognize that debt can be a weapon as brutal as any cannon. In 1838, under immense pressure and facing the reality that the original terms were destroying Haiti, the French government agreed to reduce the debt to 90 million francs. It was presented as an act of generosity, a concession to Haiti's suffering, but it was nothing of the sort. The reduction still left Haiti with a debt larger than its economy could sustain, and the French insisted that the reduction would only take effect if Haiti agreed to preferential trade terms that gave French merchants priority access to Haitian markets. Once again, Haiti was forced to choose between bad options. They accepted the reduction because the alternative was complete financial collapse, but the debt remained an anchor, dragging the nation into deeper poverty. The decades that followed saw Haiti convulsed by political instability, much of it driven by the economic desperation created by the debt. Presidents rose and fell, often violently, as different factions fought for control of the meager resources that remained after debt payments. Foreign powers, particularly the United States, began to see Haiti as a strategic interest and a financial opportunity. American banks started to offer loans to Haiti, not out of charity, but because they saw a chance to replace French creditors and gain influence over the island. The debt became internationalized, spreading from Paris to New York, entangling Haiti in a web of foreign financial control. By the early 20th century, Haiti's finances were in chaos. The country had borrowed from so many different sources, at so many different interest rates, that the government had lost track of exactly how much it owed and to whom. In 1915, using the pretext of political instability and debt default, the United States invaded Haiti and occupied the country. American Marines landed in Port-au-Prince and seized control of the government, the banks, and the customs houses. One of their first acts was to consolidate Haiti's debts, taking control of the revenue streams that had been pledged to foreign creditors. The American occupation would last for 19 years, during which Haiti's sovereignty was suspended and its economy was managed by foreign officials who prioritized debt repayment above all else. During the occupation, American officials forced Haiti to rewrite its constitution to allow foreign ownership of land, breaking one of the sacred principles of the Haitian Revolution. American corporations moved in to establish plantations, recreating a system that resembled the very slavery that Haitians had fought to escape. The debt, meanwhile, continued to grow as Haiti borrowed money to pay off old loans and to fund the costs of the occupation itself. The cruel irony was inescapable. Haiti was paying for the privilege of being occupied, funding the military force that had stripped away its independence. The original French debt had metastasized into a comprehensive system of foreign economic control. When the Americans finally withdrew in 1934, they left behind a Haiti that was even more deeply indebted and more politically fractured than before. The debt to France, the debt to American banks, and the debt incurred during the occupation combined into a crushing burden that defined Haiti's economic reality. Haitian governments, desperate for revenue, continued to borrow, often on terrible terms, simply to keep the state functioning. Each new loan was justified as necessary for development, for infrastructure, for stability. But in practice, most of the borrowed money went straight back out of the country to service old debts. Haiti was running on a treadmill, exhausting itself just to stay in place. It was not until 1947, 122 years after the original indemnity was imposed, that Haiti made its final payment on the debt to France. By that time, the original 150 million francs, reduced to 90 million, had ballooned through interest and additional loans to a sum that exceeded $21 billion in today's currency when calculated with cumulative economic impact. The wealth that Haiti had transferred to France over more than a century represented the entire developmental potential of the nation. It was money that could have built universities, hospitals, roads, and industries. Instead, it went to compensate the people who had once owned human beings. But even the final payment in 1947 did not free Haiti from the legacy of the debt. The economic structures that had been built to service the indemnity, the reliance on foreign loans, the extraction of agricultural surplus, the neglect of infrastructure and education, all of these had become embedded in the fabric of Haitian society. The country had been shaped by the debt, its institutions warped by the need to pay, its people conditioned to expect that the wealth they produced would leave the island. The debt had ended, but the poverty it created had become self-perpetuating. The psychological and political impact of the double debt was perhaps even more devastating than the financial cost. Haiti had been forced to accept the premise that its freedom was illegitimate, that the act of liberating oneself from slavery was a crime that required restitution. This premise, accepted under the threat of violence in 1825, became internalized over generations. It sent a message to Haiti and to the world that black self-determination came with a price, that former slaves could not simply claim their freedom, but had to purchase it from their former masters. It was a doctrine designed to delegitimize the Haitian Revolution and to ensure that no other enslaved population would dare to follow Haiti's example. The story of the Haitian indemnity is not a footnote in history. It is a case study in how financial instruments can be used as weapons of imperial control just as effectively as armies and navies. France did not need to reconquer Haiti militarily. They conquered it economically, using debt as a tool to extract wealth and ensure dependence. The mechanics of the debt trap, the impossible terms, the compounding interest, the forced borrowing to meet payments would be replicated in different forms across the colonized world in the 20th century. International financial institutions would use similar techniques, demanding structural adjustment and austerity in exchange for loans, perpetuating cycles of poverty in the name of fiscal responsibility. For Haiti, the consequences of the double debt are visible today in every measure of human development. The country ranks near the bottom of global indexes for health, education, and economic opportunity. Its infrastructure is fragile, its institutions weak, its people resilient, but trapped in a cycle of poverty that has deep historical roots. Natural disasters, like the earthquake of 2010, reveal the vulnerability that was built into Haiti's foundation by more than a century of resource extraction. The lack of hospitals, the absence of building codes, the weakness of the state, all of these can be traced back to the choices that were forced on Haiti in 1825 and the decades that followed. In recent years, there have been calls for France to repay the money that Haiti was forced to transfer, to recognize the indemnity as an act of extortion, and to provide reparations for the damage it caused. French officials have resisted, arguing that the debts were legal agreements made by sovereign governments and that modern France cannot be held responsible for the actions of the monarchy. But the legal argument misses the moral reality. The debt was imposed at gunpoint, it was rooted in the legitimization of slavery, and it violated every principle of justice. To say that it was legal is simply to acknowledge that the international system of the 19th century was designed to protect the interests of imperial powers at the expense of colonized and formerly enslaved peoples. The economic historians who have studied the Haitian indemnity estimate that if Haiti had been able to invest the money it paid to France into its own development, the country would be unrecognizable today. The compounded value of that lost investment, calculated over nearly 2 centuries, runs into the hundreds of billions of dollars. It represents schools that were never built, roads that were never paved, industries that were never developed, and generations of Haitians who lived and died in poverty that was not inevitable, but was imposed. The counterfactual history, the Haiti that could have been, stands as an accusation against the logic of debt as domination. President Boyer died in 1850, living just long enough to see the beginnings of the misery that his decision had created. History has judged him harshly in Haiti, seen by many as the man who sold the nation's future to avoid a fight. But Boyer's choice was not made in a vacuum. He was facing an empire with warships and the willingness to use them, and he was leading a nation that was exhausted, isolated, and desperate for recognition. His tragedy was that he believed the promise of the international order, that if Haiti played by the rules, if it accepted the terms of the powerful, it would be allowed to prosper. He learned too late that the rules were designed to ensure that prosperity would flow in only one direction. The legacy of the double debt extends beyond Haiti to every nation that has struggled under the weight of illegitimate and odious debt. It raises fundamental questions about the morality of debt contracts, about who decides what is owed and what is fair, and about the mechanisms of international finance that allow powerful nations and institutions to perpetuate inequality across generations. The Haitian indemnity was not an anomaly. It was a template. It showed that you do not need chains and whips to maintain control over a population. You just need a ledger, a contract, and the willingness to enforce payment by any means necessary. In the end, Haiti paid for its freedom twice. First, in the blood of the revolution, when hundreds of thousands died fighting for the right to be free, and then in gold, transferring the wealth of generations to the people who had once enslaved them. It was the most expensive freedom in human history, and the cost is still being paid today in the poverty and suffering of the Haitian people. The double debt stands as a monument to the cruelty of empire and the long shadow that historical injustice casts across the present. When we look at Haiti today, we should see not just a poor country struggling with instability, but a nation that was systematically robbed of its future by the very powers that claim to represent civilization and progress. We should recognize that the poverty of Haiti is not a natural condition or a cultural failure, but the direct result of economic violence that was inflicted deliberately and sustained over more than a century. And we should ask ourselves what justice looks like for a crime that was perpetrated by governments, sanctioned by international law, and never acknowledged or repaired. The answer to that question will determine whether we are truly committed to a world where freedom is a right, or whether we still believe that some people must pay for the privilege of being human.